You can find a home in Busia at the border whereby a bedroom is in Kenya and the living room is in Uganda. Why? There's no physical barrier in this borderland. Like there's a place called Whatever. What separates you from Kenya is a road. So when you're coming from Tororo getting into Busia and you're using, say, public means and you're boarding off this taxi, the taxi puts you in Kenya and then you cross over and come to Uganda. So someone is in Uganda, half of the farm is in Kenya, the other half is in Uganda. So how will you control such a business or such trade?
We identified partners and experts in the field of ICBT who helped us who actually did country assessment reports. They forwarded to Austria and LPI. Now, the quartet did a synthesis report, which you will get to, which will be presented to you, and I think it is also in your folders. From there, we had a presentation in July in Nairobi, where we were asking for government buy-in, and we were supported, as we have been told. And we moved on to the second stage of now doing the borderland research to find out what is happening in ICBT. And that is what we are going to listen to for the remaining part of today and tomorrow. We were engaged as the academic line, where we were supposed to harvest knowledge from our experts in the field.
My name is Fikadi Adunya. I'm assistant professor at the Department of Social Anthropology at Addis Ababa University. What I found out important and useful is actors in cross-border security governance. It could be state actors, it could be local actors, it could be CSOs. Those actors can capitalize on using ICBT at least as an entry point, because people do know that they cannot conduct informal cross-border trade, exclusively. They have to they have to depend on each other. So ICBT somewhat harnessed interdependence, mutual engagement.
But why do they choose to take the shortcuts and not the official route? Why? There's too much bureaucracy in red tape. You need a form. The form is at the ministry. You need to go to the ministry. Now the distance from Kampala to Busia is over 202 kilometers. Now if it is 202 kilometers, when will you go to Kampala and back? That's a day's time. But you're crossing either tomatoes, or you're crossing maize, you're crossing beans, you're crossing these staple foods, really. And they are not even worth 100,000 Ugandan shillings. And yet you need transport of 60,000 to get a form. Of course, the Panya routes become more inviting. As much as we would want it to be official, the other routes become more inviting.
It may be informal, illegal on the part of the government, which has the generating revenue from the commodities moving or transferred across the border. For the people, it is not informal because it is part of their livelihood. So the concept-wise, that the researchers, they have to be careful. What do you mean by informal? From what perspective? From the government, the regulatory body perspective, or from the community perspective?
I think it's quite important that we need to, as researchers and also as civil society organizations that are concerned with border issues and dynamics, we need to have a broader perspective and understanding about the definitions about the terms that we use. And I see that in most studies, cross-border trade activities are either seen as, at best, informal or illegal. And I think this is a narrow understanding and a narrow conception, to the extent that the lines between what is legal and illegal are not always clear. There is a blurry area, there is a gray area, because one thing that is illegal in one context is legal in the other. And if I can give you an example, for instance, in Ethiopia, trading in alcohol is absolutely legal. There is nothing wrong about it. In Sudan, it's completely illegal.
In other words, the same routes, for instance, that are used for the informal cross-border trade and activities can also be used to perpetrate some level of insecurity.
A security that gives consideration to humanity. We need a security that takes into account the livelihood of the people. We need a security that allows participation of those people who are in these particular areas. And maybe at the end, then we don't need a top-down approach. We need a balanced approach. I don't say down-top, a balanced one. Thank you.
There's also another form of informal trade, putting into consideration that government has come up with facilitative measures to facilitate the border community survive under the informal cross-border trade arrangements. There are other traders who are not necessarily the border communities, but are taking advantage of the simplified arrangements and the considerations to make sure that they evade government revenue. Now, how do they do it? For instance, they go into Kenya, Nairobi, purchase a truck of goods, and then park just next the Ugandan border on the Kenyan side. And when they get there, they engage young women and youths to carry these goods across. So they keep carrying bit by bit, small items. And to the onlookers, you clearly see that these items do not attract tax. But if they begin in the morning, by evening, they have ferried a full truck across. And when they get a crossover, then they get engaged transporters who can help them transport those goods inland. So for the cross-border communities in such an area, they are basically conduits. They are being used by some of the wrong elements, to transport goods. And as soon as they are done their transportation, they are paid off their dues, and then the big trader gets a truck and transports his goods. So as a government, we have got a very big challenge to strike a balance between facilitating informal cross-border trade without necessarily compromising the security or the economic interests of our countries.
The meeting of IGAD member state officials from trade, customs and security from IGAD member states, namely Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, and Uganda. They gathered to discuss on how the region can address the nexus between informal cross-border trade and cross-border security governance in the region, which basically is looking at cross-border security issues in the IGAD region. And as we all know, the nature of the cross-border areas in IGAD entails a lot of cross-border movement, as well as a lot of informal transaction that happens, specifically informal cross-border trade in a large scale. And the basic aim is to see how this interaction can be leveraged to promote cross-border security in the region.
Cross-border trade, informal cross-border trade regarding cross-border security governance is such that the two are really cross-related. Definitely all sovereign states all over the world are concerned so much about their security governance issues. How do they take control of the security issues of their country? And this is legitimate, and it's more legitimate today than it has ever been, because of obvious reasons that we know. And therefore, the fact that the security apparatus at the cross-border installations across the African continent and more so in the Horn of Africa region is a reality. The fact that people also who live on the borderlands have a right to kind of pursue their livelihood and of course undertake trade regimes and have their life go on uninterrupted is also a legitimate undertaking. And the two need each other.
Migration is the means that facilitates cross-border trade because people have to move for trade to take place. We are not in a position in the Horn of Africa where goods can move without people accompanying them. And we're also talking about really small-scale cross-border trade. Now, when we talk about migration, there is both the good migration, where people are moving for trade, people are moving to join their families, people are moving for purposes of education, for tourism, but we also have another type of migration which affects cross-border trade, and that is the irregular migration. We have elements of human trafficking, we have arms trafficking in the Horn of Africa, but we also have people moving with contraband goods. And so what we do in the migration program is promotion of the good migration and trying to help our member states to mitigate, to have measures in place to mitigate against the bad migration that actually gives cross-border trade a bad name.
Firstly, I'm very glad to hear about this extraordinary policy.
Currently in Moyale, Kenya, Moyale, Ethiopia border, there are smuggling of goods along the border.
The security at the border, in fact, these women are being harassed when they take things across. While passing Marachi, Panya area or Sofia, they are being harassed by policemen.
Women have been harassed sexually, they have been discriminated, they have been called names, smugglers.
If this policy is passed, we are going to have peace and security at the border.
The small cross-border traders will be having money, and that one will now minimize the issue of insecurity.
The new policy will going to break the trade barrier.
The community will now receive more information, and they will also turn from being informal to formal.
By formalizing the process, people will interact more.
And we are going to do our farming as a business.
There will be a lot of engagement between on either side, that is from the local community and also from the, by extension also the government or the customs department side. This will bring social cohesion.
ummaddu mar hadday shaqo hesho oo becsharada ay ka socoto dhacii uu ka joogsado waa bis jeclaanaysa shaqa la isku jeclaan nabadana way hirgali kartaa baan u leenahay shaqadan way socon masaakiintu way noolaanayaan ararkii mar hore odayaashii hablaha masaakiinta kuwa uur kale ay kunturbaan la arari jireen baa ka istaagaya aad baa loogu farxiyaa ummadan way ka faa'iideysanaysaa baan leeyahay.
It makes the movement that actually happen between two borders more easier.
This policy will going to save these people from the dirty work of running away from customs department.
Supposing this policy is passed, it is going to become easy for my farmers to carry their things across the border easily.
I feel this will create an enabling and conducive environment for the women cross-border traders.
I would like to tell our dear ministers concerning with these issues of TIMEA, East African Community, to push this policy so that they can harmonize the activities at the border, both Kenya and Uganda, so that we can have fair trade everywhere.
التي سوف تساعد كل الفقراء والضعفاء في المناطق الحدودية.
My humble request to the ministers that they should go ahead and pass this policy.
On behalf of people of Moyale, kindly pass the bill or the policy as soon as possible.